a pushy broad from the Bronx, New York. Follow her voice, a stray dog is nice. She's a pushy broad from the Bronx, oh yeah. Don't be surprised if you wanna listen twice. Make decisions, find the right choice. Know yourself better, find your own voice. It's okay if you need help today, cause everybody needs a little push. From the pushy broad from the Bronx, New York.
Welcome, Transformation Talk Network listeners. My name is Ellen Stewart, and I am the pushy broad from the Bronx. Welcome to my show, Recovery Recharged, where we share advice and support from experts in addiction, recovery, and life. I am delighted to bring this expert on today, and I know all of you out there are going to get something out of this show. I love the title, first of all, Parenting on Purpose. It's very poignant, it's very specific, and it's said with purpose for sure. We have today Dr. Luz Casquejo Johnston with us. She is a professional mom who wants to break generational patterns to build co-powered families where everybody grows and thrives. Then Dr. Luz will show you how to make that a reality. So all of you moms out there and all of you parents out there, I want you to listen up. Dr. Luz is an expert in the field of education with almost 30 years as a teacher, a principal, and a teacher educator. Throughout this time, her greatest success has been working with parents to create empowered families. I love that expression, empowered families.
Yeah.
You hardly hear that, right? She's a life coach for mom and specializes in helping women letting go of what's holding them back from being the parent they want to be. Ellen Stewart and the Pushy Road from the Bronx, Recovery Recharge, welcomes to my show, Dr. Luz. Good afternoon. How are you, Doc?
I am great. I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So happy to be here and talking to your audience. Recovery Recharged. I really am it goes so well with parenting on purpose, because when you're in recovery, you've got to recharge that life. You've got to get it going. And part of it is, where do I start in my recovery to moving forward? And what I'm talking about with parenting on purpose is the fact that the purpose of parenting is twofold. Number one, to raise ourselves to our highest potential. And number two, which people think is the number one, raising badass humans.
Okay, well, we're off to a great start. That's wonderful. The San Francisco area and good morning, San Francisco. Wonderful city. Love it. I'm glad that you're a part of it. Parenting on purpose. Why did you come up with that specifically? Where is the metaphor? Where's the pun? Tell us about that. Why so specific?
Why so specific? Because I think we compartmentalize. We were just talking about that. We compartmentalize our lives, right? We have our work life, our personal life, our parenting life. When the truth of the matter is, how you do one thing is how you do all things. So when we think about the purpose that we have in parenting, it actually informs everything we do. Because the most important person in the parenting relationship is actually the parent. I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of parenting coaches out there, and they're all about the child. What do I need to do for the child? What do I need to do with the child? And no one is talking about the parent. And that's why I love the synergy here between our two audiences, because you're talking about what the individual needs to move forward, and so am I. So the purpose part of it is to raise ourselves first, which helps us to raise these badass humans that we're trying to raise.
Exactly. You know, I see this with my clients. I have parents that come to me all the time because I do recovery work. They come to me all the time and they say to me, my child has a problem. I don't know what's going on with them. They're drinking, they're drugging, they're doing something to excess. Please help fix my child.
Yeah. You know, and that's the thing. It's, and you know this, Alan, you work in recovery. the addiction, the alcohol, whatever they're doing, and it could even be psychological things or it could be self-harm. All of those things are ways in which we try to support ourselves to become whole. I know as you know, you're in recovery. It doesn't seem like that, but when we're in that moment and of need and we don't have other solutions, other practical tips, then we lean on these things that are not as helpful, right? So it's often not about what the child is doing. It's about what we have to look at in the full family structure. And part of that is the parent. And I'm going to make a point here. This is not to point the finger at the parents, like this is your fault. But this is a family issue, not an individual issue.
We say in the American Society, we look at the American Society of Addiction Medicine and all of the work done in addiction. It says this is a family disease, meaning that when I start to counsel parents, like you said, they first ask me to fix their child, and I'm asking them what's going on with them because I see the strife, I see the mental frustration, I see the aggravation, I see the anger issues, I see the ability, the ability for parents to say, I'm going to do everything I possibly can overboard. And when they don't realize is their self-care is one of the primary ways in which the whole family gets better. The whole idea of take care of self first so that the unit will be better is something that parents have a hard time with. Don't you think?
Absolutely. And there's this myth, and I don't know if it's just in a US context. There's this myth that you do everything for your children. And we know that when I'm talking about parenting on purpose, the other thing I'm talking about is not falling into the same patterns. And we've all done this as parents, where we have this moment when we're children and we say, I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to say that. And if we don't take the time to take care of ourselves, to fill ourselves, to heal ourselves, we will default into those moments and we will have those moments. I mean, I'm sure I had them. You may have had them too, where you say the thing, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, that is not my words. That's my mother's words. I never wanted to be that way. And that's the moment when we need to step back and think about what are the things I need to do to get to the vision that I'm trying to create with my family.
Okay, so with that in mind, what are some of the key components parents must keep in mind in order to effectively parent their child? A couple of things. Number one, we're going to hit the self-care first and foremost. Self-care is not selfish. And I am not talking about bubble baths. I'm talking about caring for yourself in your mental health, getting the healing support that you need, and thinking and visioning around what you want to create for parents. So self-care first, and then creating a vision. And we might just say to ourselves, I just don't want the family that I had. Well, that's not good enough. You know, when people say, I just need this problem fixed, it's like, well, that's great, but what are you headed towards? So that's the second thing, self-care, vision, and then continuing to do the self-development work to identify the beliefs, the unconscious commitments, and the other things that are underneath in our subconscious that are really running the show. All right. So those are very, very, very big, important things that parents have to know for themselves. Now, let's talk about parenting the child. Talk about setting boundaries, setting limitations, keeping your word. Let's focus on that.
Okay. So this is number one, right? We know that there are a lot of boundaries and a lot of expectations that we need to set. We need to keep them firm, but we also need to do that with kindness, right? And so what I tend to see with parents is a swing, what I call the parenting pendulum, where you're over here with being really, really strict. I'm going to lay down the line. There's only 1 hour of electronics and screen time, and that's what I'm going to do. And then there's the reaction. And in response to the reaction from our children, and it could be a number of things, crying, tantruming, slamming the doors, all these things that cause this negative reaction in the parents. And then we swing to the other side of the pendulum where we're giving in and we're giving and giving. And that actually creates a feeling of unsafety with children. When they don't know what to expect, they're going to continue to push boundaries. So what that does is it actually makes all of our efforts to set boundaries backfire.
So how do we balance?
How do we do that? So how we do that is to know in the moment. See, there was that little moment where we're in this pendulum. We're going to be strict. We're going to be firm. There's a reaction. And right in that moment is where we need to dig in. What am I feeling in response to my children's their response, right? Am I feeling guilt? Am I feeling shame? Am I saying to myself, I don't want to be a meanie. I don't want to be a whatever. These are the unconscious patterns that stop us from being consistent and holding boundaries. So we have to do this kind of work outside of the moment where we're thinking about what are the patterns for me? Are there things that I don't want to be? And so I do the things that are opposite. So if I don't want to be a meanie, I'm really nice, I'm really giving, and then I'm over giving. Maybe I need to take care of that. Maybe it's that I feel guilt and shame because I don't want my kids to feel really bad. I'm going to care for myself outside of the situation. So I do this sort of like pre-work of looking for these issues with my boundary setting. I set myself up. The moment happens and I care for myself instead of just reacting. I care for myself.
So what do you think are some of the daily practices that parents can do to stay centered and balanced and approach their child with an even amount of freedom, deliberation, boundary setting? What can they do to stay centered?
Again, we're back to self-care. I think in the morning, there has to be some sort of non-negotiable time. I am not talking about 90 minutes or 2 hours. I'm talking just a moment. It could be over a cup of coffee or tea, but it's in this intentional moment where you say to yourself, this is how I want to show up for me. This is how I want to show up for my children. So connecting to vision in whatever way makes the most sense for you. Some people have a devotional practice. Some people meditate. Some people journal. But one non-negotiable moment in time, it can be as little as 5 minutes. It can be as little as 2. And then for me, the practice throughout the day is checking in before I respond. If you set yourself up in the morning, you have the bandwidth to do that in the moments, especially those ones that are what I like to call hot moments, right? If I've done the work in the morning, a hot moment comes, I can do a little like just one breath, center myself, connect to my vision, and then respond appropriately.
If parents want to work with you, where can they find you?
Okay, I'm all over. So I'm on Instagram. I do all kinds of reels and things, and that's pop with Dr. Luz. So that's where I do all of that kind of thing. I also have a Facebook page, Parenting on Purpose, and they can find me at my website, drluz.live. So
you talk about different kinds of parents, and one of those in particular is an encourager. So let's talk about that, and then let's go a little further. So what is an encourager parent?
Yes, an encourager parent. So this is one of the main concepts I talk about. A lot of times people will come to me and they'll say, Dr. Luz, help me. I wish I had a parenting manual. And the deal is, Ellen, that everybody actually has a parenting manual.
What do you mean?
What I mean is, glad you asked, that we have had experiences in our life with people, could be a constant encourager, like a cheerleader, someone who's always got our back, but also will help us fall help us get up if we fall. So an encourager is that person or many people throughout our lives or incidents where people have encouraged us that have told us how to treat people so that they feel seen, respected, and trusted. So when you think about who an encourager is, someone might come to mind immediately. I know this person always had my back. I know if I went to them for counsel, they were going to shut their laptop, put their phone down, and they were going to give me some concentrated time. I know that they were going to give me advice, and they were going to allow me to make my own choice. And they were there to either celebrate or pick up the pieces. So that encourager is the person in our life or the people throughout our lives or the instances in our lives where people have helped us to see our greater capacity, given us counsel, allowed us to make our own choices, and then been there to celebrate or pick up the pieces.
And how do you talk to parents about maybe not being the encourager, but maybe being the criticizer, and what kind of style that is and how someone can turn that around?
Yeah, I love this topic. The criticizer or the self-critic, we've heard it all over in mental health circles. That voice is not the voice of another person. I think a lot of people say, oh, that's my fill in the blanks voice and I need to get rid of it. The deal is that that's actually our voice that we created as young people because something was happening to us that we couldn't figure out. So we label things as unsafe or bad. And the self-critic or the critical voice is there to say, stop, don't do that. The last time we did that, it caused this, or this. And it's not even going to be that fleshed out of a thing. It'll just be like, you want to do something and you feel a pullback. And that's the self-critic trying to keep you safe. So we have to prove to the self-critic that we have done the things that are scary and we have come out on top. I call it updating the system or updating our programming.
So how would you respond to parents who have decided that they want to micromanage their child, not allow them to have a voice at all, and understand that their excuse for that is, I want to keep them safe, I want to provide a safety net for them, and not allow them to feel anything bad at all. So they have to do what I say.
Yeah. My first thing that I say to them is I ask them this question. How did that work for you? Do you know? I mean, we have all had micromanagers in our lives. We have maybe come from a micromanaging household. We know how that feels, and we know it doesn't work. So the people that default in that are not coming from this place of vision, and they're not coming from this place of, this is where I want to go. They're coming from this fear place. I mean, even when you say that list of, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this. When you say these things, there's actually a tightening in your body that tells you, I am holding on too tight. And it comes from not trusting ourselves. It also comes from not trusting that our children will make the right decisions for themselves. And again, I have to ask that question. If you feel you need to do this, I want you to think back and tell me, how did that work for you? Because 100% of the time, it didn't work.
Exactly. And what happens a lot when I see parents who have children who have children that are in the middle of substance misuse, one of the excuses they give me is that I'm out to protect them. I don't trust them. If I leave them to their own devices, they will get into trouble on their own. And I always talk to them about the fact that you cannot save them from themselves. You cannot put them in a situation where they feel so trapped, which is what micromanaging does, that they run completely in the opposite direction. So sometimes that style of overprotecting actually does exactly the reverse of what parents want to happen. Okay. And then when I talk to that child, the child says to me, my parents are on top of me all the time and the whole thing. I find also, like you said, this is out of fear. Parents are so afraid that their child's going to be hurt, their child is going to be in danger, that they want to make sure that there's always a safety net there. Don't you find that's the case all the time?
That's true. And no doubt. I mean, I do want to point out the fact that when we're working with families who have a loved one who is working through their own recovery, there are some actual dangers, no doubt. So we don't want to say like, laissez-faire, let them do whatever they want. They need parameters and guidelines, but they need freedom within those guidelines. So if it is, I want to, fill in the blank, like let's say I want to go out with friends. Well, here are the parameters that we've talked about to know whether or not this situation is going to help me on my recovery journey or not help me on my recovery journey. And you can see that this moment, this conversation does not happen in the heat of the moment with the child's hand on the door, which is when parents try to talk to their children, right? It's like their hands out, oh, I'm leaving. Well, you're running, blah, 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 blah. And the child is already in the momentum of going out the door. So it's having these conversations, making concentrated, intentional time to have these conversations around. So you're working on recovery. We know, let's talk about some of the situations, and they're going to be doing this work too, right? With their therapist. What are the things that cause me to want to drink, to take drugs, whatever those things are? How do I pick a good friend who is going to help me on my recovery journey? And we have this conversation outside of the heat of the moment so that when their hand is on the door, we can say, oh, hey, where you go? Just checking where you're going, because we have this agreement that we're going to tell each other where you're going. And I want to make sure I'm going to trust you because we've already had this conversation around who's a helpful friend on my recovery journey. And then trust them and say, I'm just reminding you of the kind of people. I want you to hold it because you know who are the kind of people that are going to help you in your recovery journey. Are those the people that are waiting for you in the car? And then trust them. I'm not going to micromanage. I'm not going to check. But that's enough for them to say, oh, hey, I made this agreement. Oh, hey, I am committed. And they're either going to make a choice that's helpful to them or not helpful to them. And the encouraging parent allows that to happen as we're working together.
I understand. So what happens here for me as well is when I talk to parents about making conversations with their kids, I mean, it's a twofold thing. And I know you find this all the time. Parents need individual work. You have to talk to each one of them. You have to see where they're coming from. However, I also find that especially when we're talking to teenagers who seem to have the attention span of a housefly, what happens is when a parent wants to say something very important to a teenager, I find that it works, especially in recovery, for parents to have short conversations. If you're going to sit down and have a long lecture where you think you're going to teach or lecture your child for more than 5 minutes, nothing is getting through. So what I tell my parents to do is just 1 or 2 sentences that are key things like, I hope you're making good choices, or just remember what we talked about, or, we have a few little things that we want to talk to you about. Not a lot of time. Just give me a few minutes of your time and then you're on the way. Just quick sentences that have a lasting impact. The problem with parents today is that every single time they interact with their child, they think it has to be a teaching moment or a lecturing moment. And neither of those two things will get through to your child.
100, a million, I just all the percents, Ellen, because if you get into a lecturing mode, you need to remember where that's coming from. Anyone coming from a lecturing mode is coming from fear. Versus we have an agreement. I trust you. Go on your way. Do you see how, when I say that, I'm rooted in what I believe in what I'm saying versus me trying to pull lecture pieces and articles that I just read. And I'm going to ask them, how did that work for you? But when you were a teenager, did you want to lecture?
Exactly. So tell us, Dr. Luz, again, where we can find you.
Yes, I'm on Instagram, Pop with Dr. Luz. You can also check out my website, drluz.live, and check out Parenting on Purpose on Facebook. That's my page. Happy to talk to any of your parents because it is about me first, taking care of ourselves, being human, and raising badass humans.
There you go. So do us a favor. We've got just a couple of minutes. All right. I want you to summarize the most important thing, the key things that parents can do today when they stop listening to us to change their perspective today in communicating with their child and taking good care of themselves. Okay, go ahead.
That's number one. Take that moment at the beginning of the day to center yourself to your vision for who you want to be when you show up and how you want to show up for your children. And 2, just take a moment to be in response mode versus in react mode. Check yourself. Am I feeling and wanting to move out of fear or out of deep wholeness and surety that I'm being encouraging? That's actually only two, but I know we're running out of time.
Oh, that's okay. You can keep going. We have a little bit more time. So and what you focused on before, setting boundaries, right?
Yes.
Setting limitations.
Yeah.
And the most important thing that I always talk about is always keep your word. Never make promises that you can't keep, and always keep the promises that you make.
Yes. Yes.
Otherwise, you lose all credibility, correct?
Yes. Yes. Get off the parenting pendulum.
There you go. Thank you so much, Dr. Luz. I'm so delighted to have you today. Please go visit her Facebook page and her website as well. The Pushy Broad from the Bronx, Ellen Stewart, thanks you for being here today. You can visit me at pushybroadfromthebronx.com. I am taking on new clients. Have a great day. If you're in the heat, get out of it. See you next time. This is Ellen Stewart, the Pushy Broad from the Bronx, saying thanks for listening. And remember, everybody needs a little push.
From the Pushy Broad from the Bronx, New York.